Hello, everybody. Thank you all for joining us. Looks like we have a good turnout. Thank you. Happy New Year. And thank you all for joining our Small Business Voices series tonight. My name is Vas Kineris. I'm the Executive Director of the Fillmore Merchants Association, and I'm also a small business advocate. During COVID, I co-founded NEXTSF, an agency that creates private-public partnerships to promote small business and the economic vitality of our neighborhood merchant corridors. We created this Voices series to support small business by highlighting our community leaders, other merchants, and our private-public partners who have products or services that will potentially help us thrive and connect with one another. And this is also an opportunity for our community to come together and get to know one another. As a former longtime business owner, I acknowledge the rules of retail change almost on a daily basis, and we need to keep our ears close to the ground to keep ourselves relevant. We certainly can't rest on our laurels. However, these are extraordinary times, and we need the full collaboration of our private and public partners to shed light on the direction of small business. So let's start the program. After yet another never imagined week, it's important now more than ever that we have accountable elected leadership. That's why we wanted to make sure to highlight the upcoming California Democratic Party delegate election. These important races determine the individuals who vote on California Democratic Party endorsements, from the state legislature to Congress, and what policies our party will support. This election takes place every 2 years when each assembly district in California elects community leaders as delegates to the state Democratic Party, which is tasked with setting the agenda, electing leadership, and voting on the endorsements for the party. Before I introduce our guests, we have a few housekeeping rules. Today's webinar is being recorded, so if you missed something or want to share it, we'll have it up on our website, or you can wait for the follow-up email from us. We'll also be opening it up to Q&A from you, so please type in your questions in the Q&A section, and we can share with our guests after they present. So I'm so excited to get to learn more about this election, our candidates. And this is also an election that's very important, but a lot of people don't know about it. So now let's meet our guests. Our first guest is Thea Selby. She is the co-founder of the Lower Haight Merchants Association, co-chair of the San Francisco Transit Riders. She's also an elected trustee at the City College of San Francisco. And of course, she's a small business owner. So take it away, Thea.
Thank you very much, Vas, and thank you, Dominique. Dominic is the blue box over here on your screen, who is the co-owners of Voices, and I have to say I'm really pleased at the work that you've been doing, and so excited that you're elevating the voices of small businesses, because it's really hard to do. And Sharky, as you will hear, is also doing that. Yeah, so I am, I'm kind of a hybrid person. I'm a mom. I had kids in the school district who are now graduated and in college and at work. I live in the Lower Haight. I co-founded the Lower Haight Merchant and Neighbor Association. And the reason it's both is because we didn't have enough merchants to be just a merchant association. So we're one of the few both merchant and neighbor associations, which has been nice because we get to work together on a lot of things. And some great things have happened with Lohamna, as we call it, during COVID, where we've really come together with the merchants to help out merchants, but also the merchants have helped out the neighbors. So it's really worked well. Getting to this race. So Vas is absolutely right. This is the race that nobody's ever heard of. And to give it in the broader context, 2/3 of the people who serve as delegates to the California Democratic Party are appointed, which they're appointed by senators, they're appointed by assembly members, they're part of clubs, but only 1/3 is crazy enough to run for office. And we would be part, Sharky and I, that 1/3 of 7 women and 7 people who do not identify as female, I think is what we're calling them at the moment, who are running for David Chu's district. District is AD 17. I've been doing it for a couple of times. This is my fourth time. And the reason I'm doing it this time is very specific. So we have 10 million Democrats in California. And yet there's almost no connection between the Democrats, who do such a good job voting people in and working so hard as voters, and the Democratic Party. And I had a very intense discussion with the chair of the Democratic Party, Rusty Hicks, about this. And what he said is, look, I'm an organizer. If you can't get 1% of your people to any given thing at any given time, you're not organized. Well, 1% of 10 million is 100,000 people. If we can get 100,000 people to talk about the issues that we care of, and specifically, we're in an arena here to talk about small business, right? So if we can get 1% of our people to go to Sacramento or to lobby on behalf of small business at any given time, then we're organized, and then we hope to be able to make a difference. So I am proud of this particular slate, which is David Chu's slate. It's called Rise Together SF. And it's made up of, among other people, 6 people who are union members. It's made up of 4 Emerge grads, and those are women who have been trained to run for office, Democratic women who've been trained to run for office, of which I am one. And it's made up of 2 crazy small business advocates. That would be me and Sharky. So I think we've got a great slate. Go to www.risetogethrsf.com to find out more about the slate. I'm hoping, Sharky, I don't want to take up too much time, so I think it'd be great if you could explain a little bit about how to register and the importance of how the whole, this is the other important thing is it's easy this time to vote. Usually it's a pain in the keister, but this time it's easy to vote. So Sharky, I'd love it if you could take it away at this point, and among other things, of course, in addition to talking about yourself, really give the ABCs, 1, 2, 3s of how to get small business to the table and represented at the California Democratic Party. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Thea. I'm Sharky Laguana. I'm the president of the San Francisco Small Business Commission, which is never ceases to me to be bizarre that I have that role. I'm a former washed up musician. I've lived in the city. I was homeless when I moved here, and now I feel like, oh, I'm the man now. You know, I'm a small business owner. I run a van rental company that rents vans to touring musicians. That was my fallback career after the music career collapsed. And I don't think I have to explain to anybody that the music industry is not doing very well post-pandemic. That's, I think, a bit of an understatement. And so I have personally really felt the impacts of the pandemic, and of course I've seen it with all my friends and colleagues in the small business community. The mayor appointed me to the commission in 2019. I became chair of the commission in January of 2020, just weeks before the pandemic was starting. At the time I became chair, I was the newest member of the commission. So I've really had to ramp up very quickly here. But I have had the advantage of beginner eyes and seeing the opportunities that we were previously missing with in terms of what we could hope to get from politicians and what we could hope to get from the government. It was really clear to me and became very visible to me very quickly that there were other coalitions and voices in government that were very well organized, but small business was not. We were completely MIA. You know, they would introduce legislation that would have an impact on our rents, on our taxes, on how we deal with our employees. And there hasn't really been an organizing force for getting small business to behave in a coherent manner that government could understand. It was often just a lot of random isolated voices that could be easily disregarded. And so one of the first things I started doing with many other people, not just myself, is trying to help organize small businesses as a distinct voice within government. And so to that end, I've worked very closely with folks like Voss, who's an incredible leader in the small business community, CDMA and Mario and Stephen and the team there, Lori Thomas at GGRA, and quite a few other people, Rory at Small Business Alliance, that's a new emerging leader. And then there's all these coalitions that just kind of came out of nowhere as a result of the pandemic. So, you know, there's a fitness coalition and a personal services coalition and a tattoo coalition and a live entertainment coalition. And so, you know, the job has been, from my perspective, how do we get all of us to be as educated as possible about how we can be effective? Because I think one of the reasons small business has not been a participant in government is, frankly, we're just too fucking busy. I got a company to run. I have employees to manage. I have a family. I have kids in school. They're not doing very great. You know, when do I have time to do any of this shit, right? Like, and when do you have time to do any of this? So, you know, getting organized means that for us, we can't wait in public comment for 4 hours to leave a comment. Like, we need to be able to get in and get out, but that's not the way the system's set up. We need to be able to present options and policies to government that, you know, most of the people that I meet in government, they have a background in law, they have a background in nonprofits, they've been in politics their whole life. They're great people, really, they are, and very well-meaning and very hardworking, but they don't have that sort of intuitive sense of how to do a balance sheet, you know, how to make sure that what you prescribe you can actually pay for. And so sometimes somebody has to be like, well, you know, look, you're adding to your expense. What are you adding to your income to offset that? Or you're removing from your income. Now, what are you going to remove from the expense to balance the budget? And I think what the dynamic that I've perceived happening over the past couple decades is tech has just exploded. It's just been so extraordinarily successful. It's created a lot of wealth and inequity. And it's natural for policymakers to go, okay, well, shit, let's tax that, let's regulate it. And that's fine and probably appropriate. But I think somewhere along the way, small business became collateral damage. And the result is we've been kind of, we've had a kick me sign on the back of us for the past several decades. The quote I had the other day was, we're as far as the government, it's local government and to a lesser extent, city government is concerned, we're a piggy bank, but always for withdrawal, never for deposit. And what the pandemic has changed is now we need a deposit. And why do we need a deposit? Because we employ, as a sector, small business as a sector, we employ half of all workers in San Francisco. And all the jobs and all the new jobs that will come as a result of the recovery, all of that will come from the small business sector. Small business is the largest source of new jobs in America. It's been the primary and only source of new jobs in America for decades. Small business has also been, women-owned small businesses have been the fastest growing sector in the US economy for 20 years. I mean, and so we talk about, in the city, we have values that are very important to us. We care about immigrants. We care about vulnerable communities. We care about women. We care about equity. And these are real important issues that we do need to care about. And these are all things that small business directly addresses, squarely supports. And so if those are values that we support, then clearly we need to, it is now time to support small business. The other thing I'll just point out is with respect to the pandemic, there is a cost to us closing down all these restaurants in order to protect the public health. Right now, excuse me, right now, we've put all of that cost on small businesses. That cost has not been distributed. It is entirely rested on the shoulders of small business. And we haven't really made, certainly as a city, a significant contribution to small businesses to help support them. So as I've gone through this process, I have learned how to be effective within government. And one of the things that we lack is a voice at the state level. And that is where, can I take a sip of water? That is where when Assemblyman Chu asked me, he said, hey, would you be interested in being a delegate to the Democratic Party? I was like, hell fucking yeah, I would. Because ultimately what that means is that small business will have more of a voice at the state level. What does that mean at the policy level for the state level? Well, like on my list of things are, we need to look at, first of all, first and foremost, relief, right? Any kind of financial aid or financial release. There's a Senate bill, SB 74, that would provide $2.5 billion to small business. We need that bill to pass. We need to organize and support that. And we need candidates that get small business and support small businesses. And so one of the roles that Thea and I would play if elected would be vetting these candidates and making sure that they're properly considering and prioritizing small business and its relative value to the economy, which is ginormous. We are half of all workers in America. You cannot have an economy without small business. You cannot have a robust economy without small business. If you let small business die, you might as well let the economy die. So it is an existential question, not just for small business, but for the state. And people need to get that in their heads and take it way more seriously. And that means that we need to organize, and we need to make sure that we have voices at each and every stage of the democratic process so that when leaders are elected, they take us seriously. Now, to date, to the best of my knowledge, small business has not played much of a role in the Democratic Party. There is a caucus called the Professional, I think it's called Professional and Business Caucus. Doesn't even mention small business.
It's actually called the Business and Professional Caucus.
Okay.
and I've been the treasurer of it at some point, and it's an interesting amalgam. I think the reason that they have professional in there is, as you mentioned earlier, Sharky, there are a bajillion lawyers who are involved in politics, and so they go into the professional category.
Right.
And business could be anything. It could be small business, it could be big business. It does end up being, I will just tell you from experience, it does end up being small business that is there, not big business, because honestly, they have very little power at this point. And one thing that it would be great to do is build that caucus to be something. Or have a small business caucus.
Yes, right. So my recommendation to David, and he agreed with this, is that we either take that caucus and rename it the Small Business Caucus, or create a Small Business Caucus, if necessary, from scratch, and bring actual force to bear. David's impression is that caucus had been relatively quiet with respect to other caucuses. And I would hope to play a helpful role in changing that, much as when I was appointed to the Small Business Commission, it was previously quite quiet. And we became very active and engaged on a policy level, and our policy output over the past 8 months has, I believe, exceeded the past 10 years combined. You know, my hope and goal would be to try and make a difference with respect to how state government looks at small business and get them to take it seriously. Now, Thea asked me to explain the registration process. Sorry, I'm even more long-winded than anybody else on this call, and I apologize.
We're learning a lot.
But
Sharky, let me just interrupt you for a moment and say what he is just about to say, Sharky's about to say, I also put in the chat. Because sometimes I find it helpful just to be able, what we really want you to do is to get registered, and I gave you the link right there. So feel free as Sharky talks to click on that link. 15 seconds later, you're going to be signed up and you're going to be able to vote. So that's my little pitch.
And we'll also share this information with a follow-up email as well. So
great. So for everybody's edification, there are 2 districts in San Francisco. 19, which is on the west side, and 17, which is on the east side. This is for 17, right? 117. So in AD 17, there are 13 people being elected. Sorry, 12 people being elected, 12, 13, whatever. A number of people being elected. And we are running. And if you go to sfadem.com, that stands for SF, a Democrat, Assembly Democrat, that's what it stands for. You don't need to know what the acronyms mean in order to run for office. That's an important thing to point out here.
In fact, I've never been able to do acronyms in my life. So, you know, yeah, I'm with you on that.
Right. Eyes on the prize here. So if you go to SFADEM and you register, you can, as Thea said, you'll be registered in like 5 minutes. They'll mail you less, probably like 10 seconds, and they'll mail you, they'll mail you a ballot, and you'll see our names on the ballot. And we have a whole slate called Rise Together SF. Maybe you might want to put the slate in the chat for us, Thea. We recommend voting for the slate because the way the peculiarities of this election are, the slate is how you manage to win. You kind of got to run together. If you don't run together, if you run separately, they just pick you apart and nobody makes it. So we are all running together as a slate, as David Chu's slate. It's called Rise Together, and so that's how that works. So I've taken up a lot of time. Vas, either do you have questions or do you want to turn it over to our folks here?
Yeah, actually, we have some questions. Actually, some people have been texting me questions too, but we'll go with the Q&A portion right now. To all of our guests, feel free to enter your question in the Q&A section. So this is a question from Steve Kaplan. President-elect Biden has nominated Isabel Guzman to head the SBA. She is the current head of small business for California. Do you see this as a positive?
Very positive. I can tell you everybody in the Office of Small Business was extremely excited by this, as are the OEWD. Obviously, everybody in California, politics and government has very close relationships with Isabel going back many years. There's nothing about this that is bad for California. It is all good. And one of the great advantages of having our local XDA now be the vice president is I think we are going to see a lot of California representatives taking a national leadership role. And that's fantastic and great for us. It's attention that's sorely been lacking over the last 4 years.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, you know, something I put an article in the chat about Isabel Guzman. And I will add that, you know, and I think Sharky, you may have mentioned that 50% of the businesses are started by women, and it's mostly it's mostly women of color who are starting these businesses. And obviously Isabel Guzman is a Latina, and I think that, you know, some of the major problems I just read in this article that they're really hitting the nail on the head is undercapitalization is one of the major problems, of course, that small businesses face. And the second one is from the standpoint of government, because you know, government is not so good with small businesses. And one of the things that Isabel is, I think, already sort of talking about doing is sourcing things from smaller businesses instead of always Amazon going to the larger, you know, entity to try and get stuff. So I think she's a very, very positive pick. I'm very excited about it as well.
Excellent. We have one more question from Eric Maldonado. He's an amazing community partner that we have in small business with Redwood Credit Union. He asked the question, as a small business owner, what policies would you recommend we prioritize in Sacramento that would have a positive impact on small businesses?
Great question. I'll jump into that because I've already been dabbling in that zone for a while. So first and foremost, you know, one of the projects that I've been working on, I hosted, conceived of and hosted a stakeholder meeting under SPUR. We did it in conjunction with SPUR, and it was something that Gwyneth Borden, who's the chair of the MTA, and I cooked up. Was commercial rent.
And she's also the former chair or the former head of the Restaurant Association. So
Golden Gate Restaurant Association.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
She's a fantastic human being.
Mm-hmm.
So you know, my idea was, you know, if everybody digs their heels in, if landlords don't lower the rent because they can't lower the rent because the mortgage that they owe on the property, the banks won't let them lower the rent. And then, you know, small businesses, you know, then advocate. We tried. There was a Senate bill, I think it was 829 or 929, I can't quite remember, but tried to do this thing where people could get out of leases if they paid the rent up to the moment in time that they left. There was like a good guy clause that would allow them to get out of the lease because of, you know, the thinking was pandemic's going to be going on for a while, and how are they going to pay the rent? And it died because the real estate industry just took great affront to it. There was hundreds, if not thousands, of messages sent into Sacramento, and small business, which was in the middle of a hurricane and a fire and a tornado all at the same time, simply didn't have the ability to match the lobbyist output of the real estate industry. So I thought, well, you know, that's all well and fine, but if small businesses collapse and we just have vacant storefronts all over the city, how does that play to anybody's advantage? Now the landlords don't have anybody to pay the rent, and the banks are going to be looking at mortgage defaults. And so we got a bunch of folks together to talk about this problem and see if there was you know, a meeting of the minds that can be had. And there was an interesting proposal that came out of that. And I've been nudging policymakers to take a look at this proposal because it doesn't require federal relief, and it is something that the state could do. And it's not punitive. It actually involves you know, letting landlords borrow money at zero interest from the state, which is then traded against property taxes in return for giving a credit to their tenants. So it'd just be a way to sort of like, you know, bridge this zone. And what we're looking at right now, at least at a statewide level, is, you know, now we have a vaccine. We're just months away, we hope, from things starting to improve dramatically. But in that period between here and there's a lot of businesses that are going to fail because they can't bridge that gap. My business might be one of them. So anything we can do to bridge that gap, whether it's covering the rent or covering worker pay or giving credits or tax relief, those are all important statewide issues that can be addressed at the statewide level. But let's also keep in mind that there are many businesses that won't make it. So how do we help those entrepreneurs who know how to run businesses get back up on their feet? We have a lot of challenges around bankruptcy code right now. It is most businesses our size have personal guarantees on loans. These personal guarantees survive bankruptcies, and so you have to file a personal bankruptcy. Many of you might not realize, but the limits that you're allowed to keep in your home were raised from 150,000 to 500,000. In much of California, that's helpful, but in a city like San Francisco, that still puts you in a position of possibly losing your home, in addition to losing your business. So I think there needs to be more work around bankruptcy law and what kinds of protections the state can provide to a business that did not fail due to fraud or mismanagement, but to a pandemic, and the fact that they took on the cost and burden of protecting the public health. Again, just going back to what I said at the start, I think the public owes small business a lot more than they have given to date, because we're the ones that are essentially paying, incurring a significant chunk of the burden of keeping the public safe. So,
and if I could just, because I know we're almost at the end here, if I could just add to that, my ideas are much less nuanced than Sharky's. My ideas are that small business needs to be paid to be shut. If they're going to be shut, if the city, which has a fair chunk of change in it as well, is requiring these merchants to be shut, I think that, frankly, I think it should have been thought of before we started shutting down everything, but certainly it needs to be done now, so that businesses like Sharky's don't go under. It's done in almost every other country in the world, and yet here we are in the United States of America, and we think it's fine to shut down people's livelihoods, to get rid of their savings, to have them absolutely completely deplete their savings, and they're not giving anything back, as Sharky has put it. It's time to deposit, put those deposits in the pockets of small businesses. And the how of it, I'm not quite sure, but other countries have managed it. They've managed it, and San Francisco is so wealthy, it's so rich, that I'd really love to see. I know I've seen a lot of ideas about tax credits, and I appreciate there's hundreds of millions of dollars that Gavin Newsom is talking about that he is giving to small businesses. Are almost entirely tax credits. Yeah. And tax credits do not pay the bills. Mm-hmm. So to me, I think we got to go a little step further, and we got to really, understand. I love your piggy bank metaphor, Sharky. It is time to put some money in the piggy bank. So I do appreciate that you said that.
Absolutely. I mean, we also have to recognize sort of the fiscal realities, though, which is either the city of San Francisco or the state of California, thanks to Proposition 15 many years ago, is able to go into deficit to pay for anything. So they have to have the money in the fiscal year to pay for it. So there are rainy day reserve funds, and I'm pushing hard for those funds to be rated, because if there was ever a rainy day, this is it. This is the fucking rainy day that we were saving for. Like, can we get, dig into that, to Thea's point? But even if we exhausted all of these rainy day funds, there would not be enough to keep all the businesses closed. That's going to require federal relief. And certainly we've been advocating for that as well. And I think it's worth pointing out that the delegates also have a say in who gets endorsed for Congress, is my understanding. Thea, correct me if I'm wrong. There's a lot of, the general belief here is that Pelosi is going to be resigning at the end of this term. So we are going to have a new congressional candidate, and the people that you are electing to ADEMs will be the ones deciding on who to endorse. So that's really important.
Right. And the only thing I'd say to that, again, and I know we're coming to the end here, but and this is what I was talking about at the beginning. Yes, we overwhelmingly endorsed Kevin De Leon for our senator, and Dianne Feinstein won by a landslide. So what I am interested in doing is not just endorsing candidates, but by connecting, but connecting the small business people to the California Democratic Party, which, by the way, has a lot of large businesses who are quite active in it. But the small businesses, again, and what, Sharky and I have talked about unionizing small businesses. Is there some way that we can collectivize our small businesses so that we can start to have that power? I think the work that he's doing with the Small Business Coalition is a great start. I'd like to see us be able to speak as one voice. Again, thank you to us for the voices. I do agree it's about elevating the small business voices, but it's also about speaking as one voice, because it's absolutely true. And by the way, all the politicians, they give lip service to small business. They will always talk about how great small business is, but it's about withdrawing from the piggy bank, not depositing to the piggy bank. So I really think the next 2 years for me and Sharky, and I think for all of you, we will do our best to get those deposits into your piggy banks, because it's, you have borne the brunt. In my opinion, small business has borne the brunt of COVID in terms of their livelihood. And it's time for us to pay you back.
Yeah.
And me back, all of us back.
Before we close, I'm going to just, I can see the question, so I'm just going to answer those questions really quickly. Ben asks how we can get people to purchase directly from their small businesses and not use the Amazon and delivery services. So one thing is Supervisor Peskin passed a law restricting the delivery apps from charging more than 15%. That was following up on a law that Mayor Breed passed. Earlier today, Senator Gonzalez in California was talking about doing the same thing at a statewide level. So one way to help do that is economic incentives, just not make it as profitable for the delivery apps. The other way, though, frankly, is just we need to communicate with the public and help them understand that when they go and pick up the food directly, or pick up the services directly, that it benefits the business directly. Nick asks Colina, hey Nick.
Yeah, can I respond to that one? Is that the one that's about the LBEs?
Yes, go please.
Yeah, I'm an LBE myself, and I think what you're saying is there excuse me if I'm getting this wrong, but is there a requirement on the LBEs versus a good faith effort, the difference between the two? And unfortunately or fortunately, depending upon how you look at it, there is a broad, depending upon the governmental agency, there's a broad way that they deal with it. Some people will say we encourage, other people say required. And at this point, there is no requirement for required at any given level, is my understanding. Sharky, tell me if I'm wrong on that. Required, encouraged LBE for sure, but percentages, sometimes I have not even seen percentages on some of these. I've just seen, that it would be encouraged to be an to have LBEs, which I think is a problem. But there's even bigger problems with that, because the definition of an LBE, it probably needs to be looked at again. There are a lot of businesses who have given up their leases in San Francisco, because why have a lease, a professional lease in San Francisco, if you can't actually go into the business? And what if you live in Pacifica, but you were an LBE, but now you don't have a lease in San Francisco? So there's all sorts of interesting things. I have been talking with the LBE commissioners about this. There are all sorts of changes that probably need to be made as a result of COVID. And I would like to see LBE requirements be a little bit stronger.
And then Nick's other questions about sales tax credits and hub zones. And I'm just going to digress for a second that PPP was previously, the expenses to PPP were not tax deductible under the IRS. And then in the new federal stimulus package, they did make it tax deductible. So in other words, the money you got from PPP, you essentially had to pay taxes on. The problem now is that the state has not caught up with that. So the state still treats the PPP loan, the expenses that you make under the PPP loan, as not a tax deductible expense. You're not allowed to deduct those expenses because you got money from the government. So that is something that needs to be fixed. With respect to sales tax credits and the hub zones, I'll confess that's not an area of expertise for me. Perhaps Thea might know more. I will just say that usually sales tax stuff, I mean, like at a surface level, that sounds plausible, that there would be support for that, particularly now more than ever. And this would be the right time to push aggressively for any kind of tax credit related to hub zones. I can't imagine why a policymaker would not want to get behind that and support that.
We did it for Twitter, right?
Exactly. You know, I think now's the right time to reach out on that. Nick, you have my contact info. Why don't you reach out to me on that, and we can follow up and have a conversation with that and see if there's.
And I will also put my contact information in the chat. If it's at all helpful. I'm on the professional side, not on the merchant side in my small business, but I do have some experience with merchants because of the Lower Haight Merchant Neighbor Association. Happy to talk at any time.
And I'm putting my contact information as well. So by the way, for anybody not familiar on Zoom, if you click on the little dot at the bottom, you can click, it'll gives you a little pop-up that says save chat. And that'll save our contacts, because when Voss ends this, the whole thing goes away. So anyways.
No worries, I'll make sure to put it in the follow-up email as well. I think we should start wrapping this thing up.
Yeah,
I, for one, I'm very grateful that we have such knowledgeable cheerleaders supporting small business and what we're going through, because even though Twitter and Facebook get all the headlines in the papers, it's really about small business. I think you mentioned this, Sharky, but there are 90,000 businesses in San Francisco. Half of them are considered small businesses. That means they employ 10 or less employees.
No,
And
sorry, just as a point of clarification.
Yeah.
Almost all, if we're just talking about the number of businesses in San Francisco, it's more like 90 or 95% are small businesses, right? Because it only takes a couple sales forces to, you know, create, and Twitters to create a lot of employees. But there's only like 2,000 businesses with more than 100 employees. It's like very small number.
That's true. That's true.
No, it's. And if I could add to that, because this is a really good point, that small businesses live here. Like those of us who have small businesses, we're from here. So we grew up here. We have our kids grow up here. We're not leaving, in a way that when a sales force, or I won't use them because they're actually from here, but when another company may downsize or whatever, no big deal. Well, small businesses, when it's a downturn, we stick around. So sure. I really think we should get credit for that. Do you know what I mean?
We do. Light bulbs are starting to go on. I swear to God, it took me months and months to get the soups to start paying attention. But when we did that big turnout on December 22nd, and we had Supervisor Yee only gave us 1 minute each for public comment, and we still took up 3.5 hours. That really raised a lot of eyebrows, and people now are calling me and wanting to talk to me. I've spoke to like 3 different supervisors today alone. And they're calling my colleagues as well. There's, you know, I'm not doing this by myself. I'm doing this with other people. Thea being one of them. My fellow commissioners, Ben Blyman and Manny Yacudiel, is now on the MTA board. We are all we are so in this. We are so focused on delivering actual real change that makes a meaningful difference, and getting people to get their priorities straight so that we can start to rebuild and recover our economy. So
excellent. Yeah. That exemplifies San Francisco values, and that's something that we export not only to the rest of the country, the rest of the world. And it's amazing what's happening in San Francisco. Our private public community is really rallying around small business. So we should probably wind down. Just want to thank you all for joining us. It was a pleasure to get to know Thea and Sharky, and good luck with the election. We're going to send a follow-up email with their contact information. and also how to register and how to get your ballot. And again, just want to say Happy New Year, and make sure shop local and shop small now and always. And remember, if we change our buying habits by just 1% to local shopping, that will create $100 million back to the local economy. So thank you again. Have a good night.